Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Um, just we'll give it a minute and let all of our attendees trickle in. I apologize for the slightly delayed start, um, but here we go. So good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are located in this on this beautiful day. My name is Kara Vincent, and I'm a knowledge translator with the Canadian Institute for Public Safety Research and Treatment. And I would like to warmly welcome you and thank you for coming to today's presentation, Supporting First Responder and Public Safety Families Impacted by Suicide. Um, this is an online discussion presented in support of today, which is World Suicide Prevention Day, and the wider month of September, which is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. So thank you again for joining us for this important topic. Um, I would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which today's event is being hosted. Our wonderful panelists are located in lots of different places around Canada, but here, where we're hosting this webinar, we acknowledge the importance of the land that we each reside on. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in honoring relationships between nations and improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples that call this nation home. So I hope you will join us in considering how we can each in our own way move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Some very, very quick housekeeping. Please note that in today's session, attendee microphones and cameras are muted in order to limit our background noise. Today's session is being recorded and will be made available online within the next couple of days, accessible via our YouTube channel, and you will receive an email notification once this video becomes available for viewing. We have set aside time for audience questions, so at any time throughout today's event, please feel free to enter your questions and comments into the Zoom questions box, which you should find at the bottom of your screen, your Zoom window screen. And this event will be presented in English with the option of simultaneous captions or audio translation in French. Please use the link and follow the instructions that will be placed in the chat momentarily. This will enable you to log into our translation platform. Please be sure to select French and keep the window open throughout the webinar. So right now, I am so pleased and so grateful to hand this discussion over to panel participant and our moderator today, Dr. Andrew Ekblad. Dr. Ekblad, my warmest thanks to you for being here and for acting in this role. And I would now invite you to please introduce yourself and our other panelists, if you would be so kind.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Kara. And hello to everybody who's joining us from across the country. This is the second time I've joined for one of the CIPCERT seminars. And, you know, it was great to be able to connect with people a little while back when we did one on treatment for trauma. Had people from all over the country reach out after that, which was it's very cool to be able to connect with people. So looking forward to today's conversation. Of course, the comments from Colleen and Dilnaz. And I welcome everyone, sort of like Kara was saying, peppering in different questions and of course following up with us afterward. So I'm going to read a brief biography on myself, and then I'm going to read one on Colleen and one on Dilnaz, so you know a little bit about who we are, and then I'm going to make a brief kind of introductory statement. Then I'm going to kind of go into some questions that Kara sent me for me to have in mind as we move forward in our conversation. And at the same time, if you want to ask follow-up questions or anything like that, please feel free to let me know. So it's kind of a funny thing looking at a biography of yourself, and I thought I would mix it up a little bit today, and it's maybe not quite as dry as it sometimes is. But I'm a registered clinical psychologist. I spent my career at the intersection of suicide prevention and working with public safety personnel. So I spent the first couple of years of my career working in the clinic of Dr. Marsha Linehan at the University of Washington. Dr. Linehan developed dialectical behavior therapy, and my career was largely following her work and working with her collaborators across the US and Canada. I have also worked in emergency settings, worked in an emergency department in downtown Toronto for a few years. I've been working in peer support settings for over 20 years. I know the adrenaline and sense of connection of being part of a team, responding to emergencies in the middle of the night, the sense of adventure that comes with hiding an air mattress in a file drawer so you can stay up all night, work all night, sleep for a couple hours, get up in the morning, and kind of act like act like you're fresh and ready to keep going. Throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to meet with over 1,000 public safety personnel. I've been on ride-alongs between New Orleans and Betchico, which is a small community outside Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, and a bunch of places in between. I currently lead a multidisciplinary mental health clinic based in Ontario, providing virtual services in Ontario and other provinces. And I am a proud board member of Beyond the Blue Canada. So that's a little bit about me and about my background. And I also want to introduce my esteemed fellow panelists. So Dilnaz Garda is dedicated to sharing her personal experience with mental illness in the hopes of encouraging others to share their stories and join in the movement of normalizing discussion around mental health. In 2016, tragedy struck her family when Toronto Police Constable Darius Garda, brother of Dilnaz, died by suicide while dealing with PTSD and other mental health issues. As the current president of Toronto Beyond the Blue and vice president of Canada Beyond the Blue, Dilnaz works to make a sustainable cultural shift in the area of mental health and well-being for the Toronto Police Service officers, members, and families, as well as police personnel across Canada. And Colleen Camps is a licensed psychotherapist with a career spanning over 4 decades, specializing in mental health and wellness, suicidality, trauma, grief, and crisis intervention. She's an impassioned advocate for mental health through the Tima Foundation and is renowned for her expertise in trauma-informed training and therapy. Her compassionate approach and unwavering commitment to those she serves have earned her widespread recognition and respect in the helping field and in the first responder community. Colleen is deeply dedicated to destigmatizing mental health issues and promoting holistic well-being in her community through the Tima Foundation, her counseling practice, workshops, training, and advocacy efforts. Her passion, commitment, and dedication to helping others are what keep her striving forward to make her life easier for those who need support. So I am going to share some brief words here. And then we'll get going with some of these great questions that everybody submitted. So these are just some thoughts that I put together. This is one person's perspective. Death by suicide for emotional reasons is unacceptable. And to allow death by suicide for emotional reasons is to say that there's no possibility to recover from or learn to live alongside emotional pain and suffering. It's to assume that a painful life cannot improve or be fully lived. It is an act of despair that also sends a message to others. There is a painful message that they could not, the others have to live in the wake of the suicide and know that they could not help the person who died, that their love was insufficient. Every suicide leaves in its wake many grieving who would do anything for the opportunity to demonstrate their love for the deceased, and an aching desperation to have them back or to convince them not to. But there's also a harrowing challenge presented to those who survive. The challenge presented by a loved one's suicide comes as a question. And the question is, how will you live? How will you live in this world and in a world that now includes this death? Each suicide sadly increases the likelihood of another suicide. If we ignore the profound traumatic impacts of the job of caring for society, the profound traumatic impacts that can contribute to suicide, we are breaking a bond with public safety personnel, and we're breaking a bond with ourselves. Public safety personnel are people, and if it is psychologically challenging for people to care for people, we don't respond to these challenges. We're saying that we don't care about those who care for us. And if we don't care for those who care for us, we're also saying that we don't care about our loved ones, our friends, our neighbors, our families, and ultimately ourselves. If we're indifferent toward the lives of those who serve, why would anyone come to help a fallen elderly person, or a burning house, or a choking child? To become inured to the suicides of first responders is to despair not only for them, but for ourselves. And it is to treat those who serve and save and try to save us as disposable. If we treat those who are suffering and serving as disposable, how can we expect anyone to be there for us when we need saving? Now, paradoxically, each suicide simultaneously opens the door for connection with others who have lost loved ones and creates a heightened and felt sense of both life's perilousness and preciousness, and what we now sometimes call post-traumatic growth. So with that opening statement, I just want to say that we're obviously talking about a very heavy topic, and I don't want to shy away from that in the least. I also want to say that, I really believe that Colleen and Dilnaz are here as beacons of post-traumatic growth, as beacons of hope, and I'm sure that many of you in the audience will find common ground with our thoughts. I'm joining you from Ontario Police College in Aylmer, Ontario, where all of the police officers, or soon-to-be police officers and recruits, come for training. I'm here to participate in a mental health evening tonight, so it feels like a particularly apt place to be on a particularly apt day. So thank you very much for having me. I'm going to jump into our first question here. And what you might notice me doing after my first question is I might stand up for just a moment, because I was generously given a very large classroom and told that I could be here for a few hours. And then right in the middle of my talking, the light went off. So I'm glad I got my ring light, and I'm going to see if I can get some other lights to come on. But let's get going with this. What are some of the unique factors, trauma exposure, identity factors, et cetera, that can contribute to mental health challenges and suicide risk amongst first responders and other public safety personnel? So again, what are some of the unique factors that can contribute to mental health challenges and suicide risk amongst first responders and other public safety personnel? So
I would actually, my response certainly would be that first responders face unique mental health challenges and suicide risk factors that extend beyond what any of us in the general population experience. And I think the daily exposure to trauma, such as witnessing violence, death, severe injuries, disasters, that creates cumulative burdens on these individuals and often is referred to as occupational trauma. I think over time, this can lead to, a post-traumatic stress, moral injury, or emotional exhaustion. And I think if we can identify the factors, any of these factors, I think it's our first responders. We know that many first responders tie their sense of self-worth and purpose to their role. So an injury or a mental health struggle or early retirement can have profound personal loss for these men and women. I think, again, stigma within the profession often discourages help seeking, as vulnerability is sometimes seen as a weakness somewhere. Organizational stressors, including long shifts, irregular schedules, high workloads, internal politics, and I also say the challenges around operational injuries. Together, I think all those things remain huge factors, but together, I think these factors create a complex web of risk that requires a trauma-informed, culturally competent approach for all of us around prevention and support.
I think Colleen summed almost everything that I wanted to say up. I think that there are a lot of jobs, that you're exposed to trauma and cumulative trauma for sure. But I think the moral injury part, I think when you actually decide to get help and there's so many barriers, or you're almost felt like you can't because, well, if you're getting help, then how are you the helper? So, and I also think that it's just a cultural issue. I mean, we see our annual checkup, we don't blink. We stand around the water cooler, we talk about our diabetes medication and heart medication. What are you on? My knee's going, my back's going. Can you tell I'm 43 and that's all I talk about around the water cooler these days? And I just think like we need to do the same. I'm on this anti-anxiety med. How are you doing when you upped it by 5 milligrams? Like what's going, like, we just don't do it. And I don't know why, but as a culture, we don't. And I think it's important sometimes to, while PSPs are very unique, absolutely. I think sometimes too, we have to kind of broaden that scope so they don't always feel like it's a very unique piece that they can't get out of. I think sometimes feeling like as a society we're struggling might also help, and that we need to do better as a society to change our approach to things, right? So I'm not going to say much more than that because I think it would be redundant to what Colleen's already so brilliantly said.
Dilnaz, do you have any thoughts on what changes society needs to make to start to shift this conversation a little bit? And Colleen, feel free to jump in there. It's interesting to kind of zoom in on the individual and then also look at the broader society and to think about both. So I'd love to invite any thoughts there.
I mean, I think COVID was a great equalizer. Like, I remember just posting really ignorant pictures at the onset, like, I got a couple of weeks off, like, this is great. And then people really realized how quickly mental health can affect anyone and everyone. And not just something that happens during COVID, right? And now COVID's over, but the residue, the residual impacts of that experience on adults, on seniors, on our young generation. As a high school teacher, we keep, oh, that's the COVID cohort. Well, what did they lose? How did that impact their mental health? How did it impact their social skills? So I think going through experiences almost in a forced way that sometimes people don't experience, right? And then you're kind of ignorant sometimes. So I think there's that aspect. I also feel like it's a generational thing. I believe that, for example, if as a parent I've got an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I'm having a moment and it's not that pretty, my 11-year-old is giving me coping strategies. I think you could use some mountain breathing right now. I'm like, I could use you being less of you, right? But like, I never knew that. I never knew that as a technique, as a skill, I'm getting forgiveness for my children about my own mental health and stress. Well, they can only afford me that forgiveness and graciousness and empathy and sympathy because they've been taught that. And I think part of it is time, is, in any infancy of a disease, whether it was AIDS, whatever, right? There's like, oh, you can catch it by shaking your hand, right? And Diana did that famous handshake, and we are like, oh my God, she doesn't have AIDS. So I think in an infancy, if anything, it's a lot of awareness, a lot of education, and formalized education in our school systems that is teaching people. There's awareness campaigns, and sometimes it's just time to move that marker um, on a societal level.
And Dilnaz, I love how you say, I mean, you opened it up to allow your kids to be able to say things to you. I think it's, if we can give space for people to talk about these things and realize that that's not the S word, you can't talk about that, you can't talk about feelings, is that that's what we have to do. And I think one of the things that I struggle with sometimes is in some of these first responder organization is there's a lot of what I would call organizational betrayal, is that we shut them down. We shut people down. We're not allowed to expose ourselves and talk about things, and that doesn't help, right? And I think it is really important that if we can give space, it becomes a conversation, like you said, around the water cooler. We have to do that. And I think we can't be afraid. I think everyone's afraid to say that, to talk about suicide, and we can't be afraid anymore. There's nothing fearful about this. And people would be amazed at how often, and I think I would say on a weekly basis, I am asking someone about suicide. And it could be a random person, it could be someone I know, kind of know. But to me, it's about the same as I would say I'm worried about somebody. Like I'm worried, and then I'm going to add this to the conversation. We'd all be amazed how many would say yes, right? And I think, and that doesn't mean they're going to kill themselves, but it means that we've allowed ourselves to open up and to have a conversation. And I think it can be done with kids, with adults, with seniors. Nobody is susceptible to that. So
there's a question here. I'll read it because I think, it's interesting. How can we engage our employers, particularly human resources and labor relations, to step up and embrace a trauma-informed approach to supporting and or holding accountable their employees? Holding accountable the employees, that's interesting. Maybe I'd like to maybe hear a little bit more about that. But if we think of supporting employees, and so maybe I could paraphrase it as how can we encourage organizations to support public safety personnel in a trauma-informed way? So I would, one thing that has come up before, it came up in a talk that I did a little while back, is talking about the trauma or inconvenience, stigma related to mental health and public safety amongst public safety personnel and amongst organizations. Maybe it's this sort of like, well, I don't want to do anything about it because I might be doing the wrong thing about it, so I won't do anything at all. We're better off if we don't talk about it at all. And I wanted to, not to put Dilnaz on the spot too much, but I wanted to briefly mention the Ontario Police Suicide Memorial. So the Ontario Police Suicide Memorial is an event this year, happened for the second time at Queen's Park in Toronto. And, a number of politicians came and spoke, the premier spoke, police leaders came and spoke. So some very influential people came and spoke. And then names are called of police officers who have died by suicide in Ontario. And when a name is called, a loved one comes up on a stage and puts a rose in a vase representing that death. And the amazing thing, there are many amazing things about it. But one of the most remarkable things is all of these dignitaries and very, very influential people who show up, and they show up as an extension of the advocacy of Dilnaz and others. And it's a very heavy and also hopeful event, because what it says to me, and going back to the question, this is a group of leadership, and I'm not sure where you're located, the person who posed the question, but a group of leadership dignitaries who show up for this thing. This is not in some, corner with some people who are, struggling, holding hands in a basement or something like that. This is at the, the kind of most public and influential center maybe in the province, with some of the most public and influential people in the province attending. So again, I see it as a very hopeful event, because all of the work that's being done to shift the conversation and to shed light into this dark area, to shed a necessary light into this dark area, is making a difference. And so anyone who's in Ontario, I would say, you'd be lucky to get a seat at the Ontario, at the OPSM, at the Ontario Police Suicide Memorial, and you would be lucky to get a seat at the Beyond the Blue Gala, which is a damn good party that Dilnaz puts on. Leadership is attracted to responding to this issue. And we might be, you could have questions about why are they attracted to responding to this issue, et cetera. But there is a cultural shift that is happening. I know that it's happening here in Ontario, again, with leadership responding to this need, with the need being spoken in more and more public ways. And I really hope that there can be ripples of this leadership change happening, in Ontario, but also across the country. I think that increasingly leaders who are unwilling to acknowledge the risk of suicide amongst PSP, who are unwilling to acknowledge the traumatic impacts of the job, they're painting themselves into a smaller and smaller corner. And they need to stop painting, because there's a lot of people, there are more and more influential people who get it, who are changing this conversation. So I would definitely direct anyone to the OPSM and to BTB as just a couple, and I know that there are many, but a couple of examples of this changing tide related to this.
So Andrew, Dilnaz, go ahead.
No, feel free to. I was going to offer something, nothing short of just sassy. So I feel like maybe you do it, Colleen.
I think I might be sassy too. So the Tema Foundation, we do work all across the country. And so when I hear a question like that, I would say things like, training is always good. But you know what? The problem is the challenges. And I would never not say training, because that's what we do. We train in different organizations around this. But here's the challenge, is that sometimes it then, for the people we're training, it becomes like a checkbox. And so when I think about what can people do, and I think embracing this by saying, we believe in this, we got to do something about this. You know what they can do? Here's what they can do. And I hope they're listening too, is that what they can do is benefits, increase these people's benefits, right? I work with first responders in my practice, and sometimes it's people get $10,000, for instance, one of the policing places, $10,000 a year towards counseling and services. Yet I work with another one who's firefighter, $500 a year. It's crazy. It should be unlimited. So finding them the service, getting them to skip the lines on the service, and us being able to also have opportunity to be able to talk about these things around this. People are not broken. They are injured. And you talked about at the beginning, Andrew, around post-traumatic growth. It can happen, it works. And I think it's allowing these individuals to be able to get the right kind of service from the right people who are properly trained. And I think you can start, that's one way to start supporting this. Sorry, Dilnaz.
I'm actually curious if the person asking is in a leadership role of rank, because I'm happy to kind of face the last part of the question is how do you hold members accountable? So I'm curious if you want to add more, I'm happy to do that. I've got a twofold answer. When my brother died, I went on this journey of doing a systems scan environment. I joke now, 10 years later, that therapy would have been the easier route. But there's two things I realized. I could bang my head against systems that are very slow moving, or I can just do a grassroots approach. And so my short answer is, how do you get leaders to, you don't. You just don't. You don't waste your time there. You start finding your allies, you start doing good work, you start finding alternative routes, and you start building trust. And then leaders notice and it will happen. Alternatively, when you're looking at this issue, it is a business and sense model. It really is. And I approach leaders who, I mean, that last part of the question, how do I hold members accountable? Well, that's a budget question, right? I'm losing money. I'm losing people on my team. I've got to look at it from a financial point of view. And I've done many presentations to show that actually the cost benefit of being proactive is more fiscally responsible than finding like someone who is just automatically appealing something, spending lots of money, and guess what? They're legitimately off. So for every fraud case that you count, you're wasting more money trying to find the fraudsters, because these jobs are callings, just like teaching. Trust me, try teaching teenagers, okay? But these jobs are callings. You literally have to be like, it's a calling. So this is our identity. No one wants to be off if they don't have to be. And, so these are the different prongs that I look at for this question is, thankfully, I do have, like Andrew said, leaders who are paying attention and who are part of these things. But I'll be very frank, some of them are shamed into doing it, because when you're not at the OPSM or when you're not at the gala, other chiefs go, oh my God, how did I miss this? What am I saying? So there's a multi-pronged approach to how this happens, and it's not a one answer. And I think what we fail to realize is we really get caught up in the emotions around mental health, and we have to see the business side of things. And when you approach it from a really 360-degree angle to look at what these boards, what the leadership, what they have to do in terms of a budget, and if you can actually prove logically to them our evidence, our approach still wins out, then everyone's happy. I don't know. I don't know if I'm saying the right things, but this was what I realized that I had to do on many levels. Like I had to save the immediate members who were either, like I say, I didn't have time to go to chiefs and get policies approved. I literally started an organization because it said you're either dead or divorced. My brother died. And so we had to do a boots on the ground kind of approach to ensuring services and resources are there. In the interim, I worked on a systems level. It takes a long time. So there's a lot of considerations there. And I want to respect whoever answered that question in whatever way they meant it. So
Okay. Thank you. I'm toggling around here through a few different questions. Yeah, and so just a comment from BC, suicides in the BC paramedic community. Obviously, tragic and a theme that is all too common across the country. And I think that Dilnaz and Colleen are both highlighting the need to figure out how do you work towards system change, and how do you, as the questioner puts in the word now here in all caps, how do you address what is necessary, what can be done now? And I think that that's a lot of, Dilnaz, Colleen, what if I'm going to ask y'all a tough question. This is a very tough question. I'm glad nobody's asking me this. So someone drops you in Vancouver tonight and gives you the address of the paramedic headquarters, and you know that within the province there have been a number of suicides relatively recently. What do you do?
This is what I did. I did that. I did that at TPS. We had 4 suicides within 3 months. OPP had the same startling number. Paramedics. I think you don't do meetings. Do the opposite of meetings. But all joking aside, I mean, I think you sit in the grief. I think that's often some of the step that is missed and we activate instead of sitting in the grief. And I think sometimes we need to really listen to what's happening. I'm a staunch advocate for the 2-layered approach. I really am. And for me, one of those layers is sitting with the people, sitting with their families. If we don't think that their families now, their anxiety's through the roof because this is part of what's happening in their professional community, and I think that's what we need to extend is the member who's affected by it. Well, it's the family members, it's the support circles, it's colleagues, it's leadership. Oftentimes we see leaders as the adversary. They feel so helpless. They feel like I'm supposed to be a leader and I've failed my people. And now with this tragedy, I actually don't know how to walk them through that. I am actually devoid of the psychological and emotional intelligence skills that I need. Well, look at the gap in leadership. So let's define what leadership takes too, right? So I think in these instances, you have to sit with the people and you have to show them or provide them with immediate resources, peer support, professional resources, programs, vetted clinicians who can activate immediately. Because oftentimes we blame the employer. And it's an easy blame because there's so much anger. But until the employer catches up, until the policy changes, until the systems change, we need to be able to provide them with immediate support. And I think what happens is I remember that, you could drop me in, did you say it was Vancouver? Did we choose beautiful Vancouver? Okay. You can drop me in Vancouver and I would, sit in grief and then we'd fly out. And that's what happened is when my brother passed away, there was so much noise, so much support and noise. And then the eerily deafening silence that happens about a month later and 2 months later. Because we think that grief's going to hit right then and there. So you can drop me. But unless you're going to pay for my hotel for about a year to check in with these people, 2 months, 3 months, it might hit people 6 months later. I'm not leaving. So, suicide is just so layered, so complex, so hidden in the shadows sometimes. And we really need people who, like Colleen identifies, is not afraid to say it, like is not afraid to say the word, talk about it, put out the media blip. We lost a paramedic member to suicide. I've had to talk to chiefs and say, stop calling it an immediate death. Stop it's suicide. Like it's suicide. It's call it what it is. And then you work with the leaders.
Yeah, I think it's also, and I think suicide is, again, it's that dirty word for some, right? I think it's being able to talk about as much as we can, but also the reality is it's an occupational fatality. Right? It's a workplace injury. It's based on the things that these people have been challenged with. And I think giving permission for people just to grieve the way they need to grieve. And Dilnaz, I'm so glad you didn't stop at the first visit that you had, because that's exactly it. Nobody's ready necessarily at that point. I think it's great support. It's good to be there. I think presence is important. But here's the thing is that we put all this energy, we feed people, everyone comes out of the woodwork, we put it on, we publicly announce it. all these great things, but you're right. Then there's the silence after the noise stops. And that's when people really start to struggle. And that's where I think we forget. I always say 4 to 6 weeks is really important. It's important to prevent longer term outcomes, mental health outcomes from the ones that are grieving. So how much support we can put in, but it's got to continue after that.
Yeah. Thank you. There's a question here. I'm going to read it. I like this. I mean, I like all of them, but there was one that stood out to me here. Joanne, I'm going to do something really risky here. I'm going to try to pronounce your last name. Joanne Trofanico. So thank you. Can you comment on how stress-related injuries progress? I strongly believe that if people understood that if symptoms are treated and resolved early on, they can avoid permanent injury of PTSD. So, I mean, as a clinician, I've certainly got some thoughts here, and I think there's been a lot of progress on the stigma front. I think that more progress needs to be made. But I think that a lot of progress has been made. I mean, I'm here at this place, the Ontario Police College at Mental Health Night. I don't know if they had this thing 20 years ago. I think that progress is being made around stigma. I think that more needs to be made. I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, I feel like we're starting to get over the stigma hump. I don't know that we're over the stigma hump, but there are others. And another one that I feel like I am seeing, and I'd be curious, Dilnaz and Colleen, what you think, but an apathy bump. And so I feel like I'm seeing more and more, sure, mental health, I don't know quite what that is, but I'm supposed to say it's a good thing, so I'll say it's a good thing. Maybe I even think it's a good thing. But I am not absolutely positively falling apart. So I don't need it. So if somebody else needs it, great, fine. I'm supportive of that. It doesn't mean they're a bad person and whatever. But I don't need it myself. I'm not going to avail myself of it. And this can happen in general over the course of a career, or it can happen in the immediate wake of a trauma. Dilnaz describes this noise or sort of overwhelming, almost maybe oppressive level of support that comes in the immediate wake of a trauma. No doubt, oftentimes from very well-meaning people, and then the silence afterward. I think that it might be easy to think everything's fine, everybody's checking in. I talk to police officers and their phone blows up with "you good?" Like that's the sort of sufficient wellness check from their fellow officers. I guess it's better than nothing, but it's like I got 70 "you good?" texts in the last night. So on the one hand, yes, people are checking in, but on the other hand, I think it's easy to overlook the value of actually getting some mental health support in the immediate aftermath of difficult events. An ounce of prevention is worth at least a pound of cure, maybe 100 pounds of cure. And it's something that I really like to impress upon PSP. Don't wait until things are desperate to seek help out. If things are desperate, seek help out, and there are good people who will help you. And there's an opportunity, to go back to your point here, Joanne, there's an opportunity to respond to needs and to get ahead of things before they metastasize into something catastrophic. So it's important that we're naming the psychological trauma and impact that comes along with the job, but also that we are encouraging prevention programs. Of course, encouraging treatment programs for those who need it. And also, PSP don't have to choose between being fine and PTSD. There's a lot of life and variability in between. And I think that that's an important message for them to get.
See, and what it triggers for me, Andrew, and I think this is a great question from Joanne, is that when people see them, first of all, there's no health without mental health. We've got it all. We've got mental, physical. That's part of our health. But I think when people see themselves as broken rather than injured, it can deeply shape how they approach healing or even their sense of self-worth. And I think being able to see oneself as broken often carries that sense of permanence where, there's something wrong, fundamentally wrong with me. I'm beyond repair, which can lead to hopelessness and shame. And we hear it all the time in the work that we do with first responders. It's that reluctance then to reach out for support because I can't be helped, right? I've got that label now, or I've got the diagnosis, and I'm finished. In contrast, I think if we view an experience as an injury, acknowledges the pain, the damage, but also leaves room for recovery. It leaves room for us to be able to learn some resilience, and resilience is not an island on your own. You're working together with people, and it's about growth. Whether it's physical or psychological, it can be treated, it can be managed, and often healed. We can be healed with the right supports. Once again, I think with first responders, they are exposed to all this trauma. So if we can shift the language from broken or, oh my gosh, you got that diagnosis, to more you've been injured, can be hopefully empowering, and it can reframe the struggles as a natural human response that anyone would be able to do from an overwhelming experience rather than a personal failure. And so we look forward to the recovery and the renewed strength.
Dilnaz, anything that you want to add on the sort of?
No, I think I want to leave it hopeful. I think there's something that, and I could be wrong, but I think sometimes mental health also is a lifelong coping piece. I think sometimes there isn't recovery. I think sometimes there isn't who we were before. And I think to constantly say, like, we can recover, they're like, no, you can't. And like, I don't know. And I'm like, oh, but I like, can you recover? Can you get better? Absolutely. But is it now gone? No, I think there's a new you, a new way to deal with things. I think it changes you. I think everything in life should change you, or you're not living. And so I think that I'm okay being depressed seasonally. It reminds me of the loss of my brother in October and December and February. And I take my anxiety pills, and I don't know how long I'm going to take them for. I don't know. Can you recover? Absolutely. Can you do it in 30 days? Maybe. I don't know. You know, I'll tell you too, as a woman, just as I recover from one thing, something else is hitting me. So I don't know if there's any women panelists, but I can also say there's something else hitting the fan with me every now and again. So I I absolutely, there's such a joy to this idea of post-traumatic growth. But, I had a volleyball injury in high school. And every time I decide that my youth has kicked in and I try and start running again, it reminds me that it's still there. Um, and I'm okay with that. So, I don't want to go from like I've been injured and now I'm cured or I'm recovering, or it's like Andrew said, there's always this ebb and flow. And I think the only thing that's changed in my life is instead of fearing it, it's such a badge of honor. It's absolutely such a badge of honor. And I tell the people around me, like, this is the season. And then, spring comes out and I'm okay. I don't know, I'm just okay. So I wanted to put that out there. I just didn't know if I should or should not, but I'm a big mouth, so here we go. There you
But
go.
then here's the thing to add to that, Dilnaz, because I hear this all the time with people saying this sucks and this is what I have to deal with. But it's being able to look at, so seasonal affective is a great description. It's a great way to look at it. So my December, January, February sucks. It's awful. It's I'm affected by seasonal affective. Well, how come you're not affected in April, May, June, July, August, right? And then all we want people to do is think about what you do in those months. Well, I get to jog, I get to swim, I get to whatever. Then why don't you take some of the tasks that you enjoy and move them into December, January, February? See how that fares, right? And again, it doesn't mean it's a cure-all, but can we reframe things sometimes? And I think that's that hopefulness of reframing.
Yeah. And it's an interesting word, this idea of recovery. And of course, we have people say, like, how do I get back to my old self? I like what you said there, Dilnaz. I think that there's value in being very direct. I mean, my perspective is you can't. So that is gone. But I don't actually think of that as a pessimistic statement.
No.
There is no, I mean, again, you're not a dynamic person if you're not growing from your experience, if you're not learning from your experience. So, I wasn't a PSP and then I became a PSP and I was the same person the whole time with the experiences that come along with that. I wouldn't know what to say. I would be troubled by someone trying to convince me of that. I find it far more plausible, realistic, but also healthy to say the things that I have been exposed to have affected me. My worldview and my relationships have been altered. And that does not, again, does not necessarily mean have been worsened. It
Right.
means they've been changed. And again, a couple words that I used in my first statement was sometimes the things that PSP are exposed to, it would remind anyone of the perilousness and the preciousness of life, and what an incredible gift. I mean, just a tiny, tiny thing, but my back went out for the first time a few weeks ago. And I couldn't, I couldn't move. I couldn't move. And fortunately it only lasted a few days, but I had this experience of it felt like a miracle to be able to get out of bed and walk. And that experience is already fading, right? I'm already kind of taken for granted. I can't even walk upstairs. I'm already starting to take it for granted. But that experience that I would not have wanted, that of course was not a trauma, it was a significant inconvenience. I would not have wanted it, but it created this deep, deep well of gratitude within me. And in that way, I was changed through an unwanted experience, and I'm grateful for that reminder.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I wouldn't have chosen to have that difficult experience. Okay. So thoughts on support for compassion fatigue and training around that. I imagine that's something, I don't know, Colleen, is that something that the TIMA Foundation is involved in? I know that Beyond the Blue is, but we could, talk about
Yeah, we do a lot of training around what we call the cost of caring, and it's looking at compassion fatigue, moral injury, operational betrayal. We're now kind of building in there, vicarious trauma. So it is really important, I think, for people and families. We've been involving families at family nights and in certain, fire stations, with paramedic family nights, and we've been talking to families about it. And oh my gosh, it's this light bulb kind of like, thank you for helping me understand my loved one, right? And also for these men and women who are doing this work to help them understand kind of what they're going through, because oftentimes they don't tell anybody about it. And then when you start talking, it's like going, oh, that happens to me too. And you know what? I think we're seeing moral injury come up more and more than we ever did since COVID. I think we realize that, the impact of some decisions that these men and women have to make, the impact of what it has on them. So we do a lot of training in that area to really just, it's really about knowledge. It's about understanding and then coming up with some creative strategies, or just stopping and thinking about, you know, appreciating again that this is part of the job. And I always say to people, it's not about when it's going to happen. It is going to happen. It's being able to identify and acknowledge and know kind of what to do. And as you said earlier, it's about being proactive and preventative. We have to find ways to do that.
I think I'm going to add the concept of compassion fatigue from the loved person's lens.
Oh,
So oftentimes, obviously compassion fatigue for the PSP, like obviously. Interestingly enough, sometimes too, I find like it frustrated me because they'd be like, no, I'm good. So the story would be told about the incident that happened that day, and I'm like, and then what? And then I went to the next call, or I don't care. Like, and then and it's, you know, call to call to call to call. And sometimes they're very good at just turning it off, and the moral injury part or the organizational injury is more heavy than sometimes the compassion fatigue about going to the call. But I think from a family member, like, you know, dealing with my brother was exhausting. And it was like, okay, mom and dad, it's your turn. Like, I'm exhausted, and it's hard. But of course, this is from a point where my brother, when he was seriously ill, and I think oftentimes that's a severe example of compassion fatigue. You know, my ex-husband is a Toronto police officer, and just because we're not together doesn't mean that compassion fatigue isn't very real. We're still working around the shift work. And, you know, the fatigue comes from being the person that's always dealing with the kids, or, you know, whatever the case may be, or he's an incredibly engaged dad, but we're still working around shift work. And sometimes worrying about, you know, I often get, well, I don't want to share that I'm worried because they're already dealing with stress. And the police member's like, well, I don't want to share what happened in my day because I don't want to stress them out. And then no one's talking, all with good intent, and no one's talking. And so I think it's really important that the compassion fatigue is acknowledged on the family as a whole. And then and if you know, if it's a household with you know, children, then that's felt. If it's a household that, you know, I can't go over to my parents today, or the in-laws today, I'm too tired, like, everyone feels it. And so I think the compassion fatigue at that level is incredibly real, and needs to be acknowledged more. Um, and I think that I say, you know, the damage doesn't happen just to the PSP member themselves. It happens alongside the family member. And I think the healing has to happen alongside the family member. We host a lot of, you know, family workshops, groups like OSI for family members. You see the weight lifted off their shoulders when they learn the terminology, when they realize, wait a minute, my partner's on NASL. You mean this is an actual thing? Like, this is a symptom, right? And they're like, oh, okay, you're going through it too. And, you know, so it is, we're such a special community, right? Like, we've got helpers, and that's a calling, paramedics and dispatch and nurses and like, are you kidding me? That's incredible. And then you've got the family members who are helping the helpers. And you know, I joke a lot, but it is very tiring, and it's very draining. And I want to keep our family members and our family units healthy. And I think it's a journey we need to start taking together. And the police member, or sorry, the PSP member, realizing I need to also find that my benefits extend to my family as well.
we're actually just about to start a youth group virtually, starting at the end of September, with first responders children, the kids between the ages of 13 and 17. Bell Let's Talk gave us some money, and so we're going to run something, because again, it's to allow them opportunity to create discussion and feel good about and be around others. Because I think, and you're right, around the compassion fatigue, is that for the family members and the children, when they don't know what's going on with their parent, they're creating their own narrative. And we're not asking parents to do a trauma dump and say, oh, let me give you all the details. But even just coming home not talking, going to the basement, being angry, whatever the things are, it's a narrative is created. And so we always ask our first responders, at least just say to them, had a tough day, this is how I feel, this is what I need, and or allowing the loved ones to be able to say, what do you need from me? Because it is exhausting.
I know that we've only got a few more minutes of having Dilnaz with us, and Colleen and I are going to be, with you until 5 o'clock Ontario time. What is it, 6 for you, Colleen? And then
Yeah,
across.
I'm in Halifax right now.
There are a few questions for families, and I know, Colleen, you work with families, and I do too. I mean, Dilnaz has been, the Beyond the Blue organization is uniquely highly focused on families, and her journey starts with a family-related tragedy. So I thought, um, you know, if I could, there's a few related specifically to families, and maybe I'd put this to you, Dilnaz, and then Colleen, if you want to add anything, of course. But what are some of the long-term impacts, emotional, financial, and social, that families face after a loss by suicide?
I mean, they're all different. I think suicide is just so, it's definitely a different type of death. There's so many layers to it. And, I think sometimes we need to view it as a heart attack. It's a medical emergency, and one that can't be stopped. Sometimes I wish people would stop saying that it can be prevented. And it's like, fight harder. Well, you don't tell a cancer patient to fight harder. They give it their best, and if they pass away, they pass away. And I think that really disturbs me. I think there's a lot of chemistry that happens with suicide. Is it tragic? Absolutely. Um, I think financially, I mean, it really depends on, I mean, death and finances, regardless of the type of death, they seem to tear families apart. Um, and, you know, what can we do to intervene and support? What are some of the signs and distress signs? I mean, they're there. Um, they're there, and I saw them, and we tried. Um, and I just need people to understand. I think I need to, I try to get across to people, and doctor, maybe you can correct me, but like the brain is an organ, is it not?
It is.
Yeah, like, okay, so, and I don't know why we view it as we have total control over it. I mean, for that matter, like I'd love to have control over my stomach. I eat too much, and my liver and all the other organs, like my heart, and we try our best, we really do. And when diet doesn't work, we take a pill. And sometimes it doesn't work. And the brain is an organ. And sometimes, and most times, we can really be, we can steer away from it. Um, but the question was around suicide. What happens if someone dies by suicide? The impact on the family is forever. The demons are passed on. They don't die with the living. They don't die with the person who died by suicide. They get passed on to the living. Every day I think about it. I'm not absolved from one day of it, and it's gut wrenching. It's life changing. It's everything. It's now my purpose. But he's given me a gift that I got, unfortunately, too early. I mean, at 34 was when it was my age when he died. He was 29. Um, at 34, I was given the gift of understanding how short life is. And so, um, it takes a very long time to grieve. The impact is immeasurable. The other thing I say is there's the grief monster. I am of an East Indian background. I came here when I was 8, so I'm more assimilated to the culture. My mom was open to therapy and she did group therapy. My dad didn't. I don't know if that was his feeling of guilt and disappointment as a father. I don't know if that was his inability to be vulnerable in a group setting and seek therapy. I think he probably thinks he would unravel. People approach things in a different way, and more than the financial monster, sometimes the grief monster can tear families apart because there's a lot of judgment on how people choose to grieve. Um, have I gone off tangent? Is there something I should?
No, no,
Okay.
much hard
Okay.
won with wisdom.
Yeah.
Thank you. Colleen, would you like to add anything to that?
No, and I just want to support Dilnaz and just saying how complicated this grief is, because
Yeah.
it really includes feelings of guilt and shame and anger. It's that lingering sense of what if, and I think how do you where are the answers? And I think it just, like you say, it teaches you more. But it's that facing that sudden harshness, even if it's been a prolonged thing that someone's talked about. I think socially it's a challenge for some, and I think culturally you give a good example about how it might be viewed, right? And it could be shame and embarrassment and whatever else. So I think it's really understanding that and appreciating it. And I just want to clarify here around prevention, because I think your point is well taken, but I also think I don't want people to get confused about suicide can be prevented, in that we need to still talk to people. We need to try, knowing that sometimes suicide, it's inevitable, it's going to happen, but it doesn't mean we don't put our hands up and go, oh, this person's going to kill themselves, so I really can't do anything about it. So I'm not going to do anything, because there's lots of people that can get through some of these things. And then there are some that
And my apologies if that was not what I intended to come across. Absolutely. And I mean, I've been on the other end of the call, walking someone through who is suicidal, and getting them the help they need. And we just, I had a police member, we celebrated a 5-year anniversary of his attempt anniversary, so absolutely not to say that
yeah,
God, my whole journey after my brother is trying to stop it. So
yeah.
I just think so, like, yeah. So I'm going to pause there because Colleen, you worded it perfectly for me. Thank you.
So, thank you both. Just before you got to go in a couple minutes, still, Naz, maybe we can do one more family related question, and then Colleen and I'll try to respond to some other ones. But how can family voices be included in shaping suicide related interventions, prevention, postvention policy? So how can family voices be included in shaping suicide related policies within PSP?
It's a perfect question for you, Dilnaz, because
Okay. I actually thought it was a
your
perfect question.
voice.
I mean, I think that, like, my brother's dead. So I was the only one living. I mean, logistically, I'm the voice now, right? And so I had to share with people who had no idea. I mean, I remember saying to superintendents, this is how he was at home. And they were shocked because they're like, what are you talking about? He's the funniest guy in here. And I'm like, he is? There's a mask, and they take it off at home because they're the safest and most comfortable. And it's imperative that you listen to families and what they're dealing with and what their loved ones are not doing out of fear and stigma. My brother wrote a lot, and a lot of the policies that I present to chiefs I literally say, lessons learned from Darius, because he identified things that they could immediately do that would have made him feel safer, or change this or change that. And so I think the voice of a family is incredibly important in discussing policy and procedure. Beyond that, when you look at people in help, the safety plan includes, like, who would you call? So how can we not be included, right? Like, think about every form you fill out on unemployment. You go to the doctors. Okay, who's your emergency contact? Our children have to fill something out. You need that designate person. And so I think that, when something happens, we always invite the other person in, because the member who is suffering from mental health, how much are they actually retaining? And they don't want to do this alone. So having that person beside them on that journey help to take notes or digest that information or remember things or be the point of contact is so important. And I think we need to look at things. I think the treatment of cancer patients is truly the model that we should adopt. There's always a case navigator that brings all the treatment people together, all the, doctors together, right? You've got the loved one, they take care of the family. We really need to look at that model when we consider the approach to mental health. Like I joke all the time, if I had two broken legs, would you give me a brochure and say, well, the hospital's that way? Check a left, check a right, sorry, check a left, right. You wouldn't. You take them there. You call the loved one. You're gonna need a ride. And yet we give people with mental health, like, here's a brochure, you know? So that's my 2 cents on, and I think the family would feel more empowered and less estranged and less isolated. All we want to do is help. And at risk of being burdened, we're pushed aside. I think policy and procedure must include family, and that's what Canada Beyond the Blue has fought to do, is be the voice of national families for police members so that we are considered as a something as a stakeholder that can actually be part of the solution.
Dilnaz, before you go, I just want to tell you what a gift you have in what you have done for this topic, and I think your brother would be very proud of you. You've really advocated for him and for all those behind him.
Thank you so much. It never gets easier, but thank you for this opportunity, because the more we talk about it, the more he lives on. So thank you so much, Cara, Andrew, Colleen, and all the audience members out there that are showing me some love today. So thank you so much. I'm sorry I have to hop off, but mom duties call, and as you heard, my daughter's quite quite an ordeal, so I must go. But thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ilnaz.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, honored to not only have Dilnaz join us, but her, not only her wisdom and her ability to bring people together and communicate, but it comes from, what I would call an unwanted lived experience credibility. So
Yeah.
there's a uniquely high level of credibility that comes with lived experience that no one would ever want, but there's actually, if responded to in a particular way, a real power that can come with it. And, certainly an example of that. So, switching gears a little bit, but I think a really interesting question and one that I have thoughts on, and probably you as well, Colleen. But okay, I don't want to die by suicide, but I feel I understand why some people have chosen to, and that in itself scares me. Or is it a good thing? Really interesting question. And I've definitely got thoughts on it. I mean, what comes to mind for me is when people are moving towards something, when people are making a choice to do something, they're either moving towards something or moving away from something. And of course, no one knows what happens when you die. There's all kinds of this, a light goes off, or you go to heaven, or somewhere in between, or whatever. And some people feel really strongly about what they imagine, some people less so. But I don't think that most people who are considering suicide are thinking as much about where they're going as they are thinking about what they're getting away from. And it is not so much, in my experience, those who are suicidal are seeing death as a solution to the problem of emotional pain. That it is not somewhere they are trying to go to, but that it is an emotional pain that they are trying to get away from. And there's something that we can all relate to there, that we all have experienced emotional pain. We might be experiencing emotional pain, and we've all experienced acute emotional pain and mild emotional pain, and a lot of stuff in between. And we've all said, ouch, I don't want to feel this way. And some people do suffer more than others, but we can have more and more compassion, knowing that in our own experience we've had some version of this and that we want to get away from it. Certainly I've built a big part of my life around a good life can be lived both on the other side of suffering and also alongside suffering. I think there's some suffering that we can manage and alleviate, and there's some that maybe we can't alleviate as much, but we can learn and grow from, and life can be just as or more meaningful alongside it. And at the same time, I think that it can take a shift in perspective. It can take a lot of skill and professional and personal guidance, I think, to get to a place where there's an opportunity to recognize emotional pain, and also realize that the problem of emotional pain doesn't have to be solved by ending one's life.
Yeah, and I think I like everything that you've said, Andrew. And I think, suicide often is described as a choice, but that word, I think, can oversimplify that complex reality of what you just said, and that most people who die by suicide are experiencing some intense psychological pain, mental health condition, or an overwhelming circumstance that clouds their judgment and often limits our ability to see alternatives. It's like anything that, when we're faced with a challenge, is like, what are we going to do about it? I think in those moments, it may not feel like a free or rational choice at all. It can feel like that's the only way I can end this unbearable suffering that I'm going through. Factors like, we know depression and trauma and moral injury or PTSD can certainly distort our thinking. And that's why I always get, when someone says choice, when you're dealing with some of these challenges, is it really a choice because of how your brain is working and thinking about things? So I think while technically suicide is an action someone takes, it is rarely a clear, deliberate decision in the way we think of other choices. So it's really about, it's a result of maybe an illness or despair or feeling trapped in something. And I think if we can reframe or frame suicide more as a response to suffering rather than a simple choice, we actually can probably create space for empathy and for interventions that possibly can help someone find hope and begin to heal before it's too late. So it's knowing that we've still got opportunities. It's just, what are those going to look like?
Mm-hmm.
That was a great question. And thanks for the honesty from that person who presented the question.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So a little bit of a different kind of question. I'm gonna read it. Try to make sure that I'm as precise as I can in my understanding of it. I know that paramedics from across the country are going through this what in Ontario has been called an epidemic of suicide amongst PSP by the coroner. There's a lengthy report on it that was published maybe in 2019, but there's a lengthy PDF that can be found both on the recent history of death by suicide amongst PSP, especially police, in terms of the emphasis here, not the police or the onlys, of course, but the emphasis in that report was on police because there was a really significant rash of them a few years ago, but also some recommendations made related to it. I know that paramedics across the country are going through the same thing, losing workers before their time. Employers aren't doing enough to support members. Why isn't debriefing and therapy mandatory? Why are there no mental health screenings on hiring so there's a baseline for employees as their career progresses? And why isn't there a mandatory sort of years of service for paramedics before they're moved out of frontline responding? So I've got a number of thoughts here. I'll try to be as concise as I can be and let you share some thoughts, Colleen. So, you know, I definitely think that debriefing following traumatic incidents is very important. There are complicated cultural dynamics that happen in public safety services. And so I have known services that have required people to attend debriefings. I have known um, PSP who resent services for requiring them to come to debriefings. And you know, they might say something like, the most trauma informed thing that my service could do for me is to let me just choose what I'm going to do. So I think that it's an interesting and complicated, um, you know, scenario where the service and even across different PSP members that there might be different perspectives. Another version of that is I've had members go off work and there will be a wellness office, which we didn't even really get into wellness offices. What a complicated thing. But you know, there might be something from someone from the wellness office who calls them up and says, "How are things going?" And I've seen that member be furious that someone called them. You know, I can't believe that you would call me. I'm off work either because of the job or because of the service or whatever. Don't you know I want nothing to do with you? And then I've had other PSP members in very similar circumstances say, I can't believe they haven't called me. This is more evidence that they don't care. And so, you know, what to do about this? I think it's important that services have a clear policy and share that with their employees before incidents happen. So if an incident happens, this is what we are going to do. We strongly encourage you to participate, and we respect your choice if you don't participate. I think that some kind of messaging and communication can go a long way. Now, the idea of the mandatory screenings, one thing that I've become really passionate about is, you know, the language around these things can be tricky, but a mandatory wellness check or a mental health wellness check for PSP. And some services, I've worked with some services that will require these and make them mandatory. I've worked with some services that will simply encourage them. The uptake on those varies, you know, a bunch of complicated reasons why. But some kind of review of one's mental health wellness with a professional that is not an assessment, that is not an assessment, is very, very important. You know, there's the idea of the safeguarding assessments, and I think that there's a time and a place for those. But you know, you ask someone some questions that might very obviously affect their employment, and they know that that information is going back to their employer. Of course, they're going to say the right thing. And so that is something that I'm passionate about. And you know, an annual meeting, again, an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. An annual meeting with a professional that is not an assessment, I think, can be another healthy thing. So I'll bite my tongue there and let you add.
No, this is great. I jotted down a few things here as you were talking. Again, supporting everything that you're saying, and I see other layers here. And I think when we talk about debriefing, I think pre-briefing is just as important. And I'm thinking even the times when you get a call, and whether it's paramedic, fire, police, you know, whoever, when you get a call, it's even going from point A to point B. The narrative or the thinking that's going through each of their minds, the thoughts around what are we coming up to, how are we going to deal with this, maybe it's going to be a trigger point for some. What a great opportunity to pre-brief around, okay, what are we going to do when we get into this situation, what are we thinking? I also think there needs to be more talk at school. All of these schools, each one of them go, and I know policing is a little different, but policing is expecting some education. We got to talk more about mental health and wellness in school before these people even get there. And I hear too many times from colleges and universities around, we don't want to give them too much information because then they won't do this job, right? Don't give them too much, keep this away from them. you know, and we have to have more discussion. Honestly, we have to go into elementary schools to be doing this as well. It needs to just keep that conversation going. I also think more leadership training around mental health and wellness, and really challenging them. And I'm talking about hands-on working with these leaders in places that we need to try and shift that change as well. And you know, your support thing around getting a person. We do a lot of work with Halifax Fire, but with the new recruits. So they give us 2 days with these new recruits while they're being trained for 16 weeks, like what you're doing in police at the police college. I love it because we get access to them. And you know, you ask a question: how many of you have a doctor, medical doctor? Hands go up. How many of you have a physiotherapist? Hands go up. You know, a massage therapist, chiropractor. Oh, got all these things. Personal trainer. Oh, even more. How many of you have a therapist? How many have someone that you talk to? And it's like, oh, like for what? So we need to encourage people before they get into this field. It needs to be encouraged on, you need to, and that might be an expectation maybe. You need to put a therapist in your back pocket. I don't care whether it's holistic, whether it's a psychologist, psychiatrist, psychotherapist, it doesn't matter. You need someone in your back pocket that you can trust and that is available to you. And what better way, and people often say, I won't know what to talk about. I get this, and I'm sure you do that, Andrew, when you've done in your practice. They sit down saying, well, I'm not sure why I'm here. I don't know what to talk. And then after an hour, you're going, okay, time's up. Like, we've only got an hour. And it's amazing what people can talk about. It doesn't always have to be about the crap, right? So,
Yeah,
so
it's true.
those are my little tidbits that I add to. I think it's just, we have to be more proactive again before
Yes.
these people even get in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Colleen. So speaking of time's up,
Yeah.
I think that that's
Oops.
all the time we got. I mean, this time for me, at least, it flew by. It absolutely flew by. I can't believe we've been doing this for an hour and a half. I'm very, very grateful for how active the conversation was. And obviously, Colleen, just your insight and wisdom and compassion, great to share some time with you. And thank you to everyone. I think that Kara will be sharing our contact information. I'm relatively easy to find online. I would love it if folks drop me a line. I think that after the last of these that I did, I had like a few Zoom calls with people talking about different things. So please feel free to reach out. There's few things I'm more passionate about and I'd rather talk about. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have spent time, especially today, talking with you.
And again, I'm happy to hear from people. You can just go on the Tema Foundation website, which is tema.foundation. And you know, there'll be a link there to send an email, and we're happy to answer whatever. And honestly, Andrew, I've never met you. I've never met Dilnaz, and I just feel like I've known you guys for years, and it was awesome to be able to do this together and have the similar beliefs and advocacy. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. So for folks who are interested within the SIPCERT website, there's information on more upcoming events. So please feel free to check that out. They do great work, sharing a lot of, I think, valuable information from experts. Kara might be sharing that right now. There you go. So a few, even just in that, in the next few weeks. So thank you again. Wishing everyone on the East Coast a good dinner and everyone out West a good late lunch. It was delightful to spend some time with you.
Yeah.
Kara, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Just my heartfelt thanks to you both, Andrew and Colleen and Dilnaz in her absence. I couldn't be more grateful for you spending this time with our audience today. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody.
Yeah, bye-bye.